This episode is sponsored by TherapyNotes, TherapyNotes.com. Be sure and check them out and be sure and use the promo code Gordon, Gordon, and you can try them out for 2 months for free. Over 15 years ago, when I started my private practice, I had to learn a lot, and most of it the hard way, and I don't think you need to do the same. Hi, I'm Gordon Brewer, a licensed psychotherapist, and welcome to the Practice of Therapy podcast, part of the Sightcraft network of podcasts. Join me in this journey of discovery as we have conversations with other leaders and professionals in both the mental and allied health fields. Join us as we explore both the business and clinical sides of running a private practice. And welcome to the podcast. This is Gordon Brewer, and this is episode number 276 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. Glad you've joined us. And if this is your first time listening to the podcast, glad you found us. And if you're coming back for more, hope you take time to follow us and subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it. I'm looking forward to you to hear from my guest today, Megginson. And Maegan is another private practice coach. She's a therapist, but also does some business coaching. And in our conversation, we just talk about being able to put yourself out there in the world, in your private practice in an authentic way and in a way that is unique. And, this is not necessarily a new topic for this podcast, and it really kind of falls in the category of marketing. But I think hearing other people's way of looking at it is always a good thing. And so Maegan and I have a great conversation around marketing your practice and also being genuine and really finding your true voice for yourself, your unique voice and what you put out there and how you work with people and that sort of thing. But before we get to my conversation with Maegan, I'd love for you to go over and check out all the resources that we have over at practiceoftherapy.com. I go through different phases of promoting different things or offering different things. And I'm in the process now of just kind of redefining how I do things with the practice of therapy. I think how I started out isn't how you end up, and that's true just in private practice in general. How you start out isn't necessarily how you end up. And so it's an ongoing evolution for me at the practice of therapy. But one big thing that I've been focusing on last year and this year is really this whole idea of just building community, because one thing we know in private practice, particularly those of us that have been doing it a while, is that it can get lonely out there. And so one of the things that I think is important to me and hopefully is important to you is to build those networks and the different communities around different niches and also just at different levels of being in private practice. There are a lot of folks listening to the podcast that are brand new to private practice or figuring out how to get things going with that. That's the reason I started the Practice Launch Club, which is a community for people just getting started in private practice. And then also I've got the group Practice Focus Group, that it was really geared more towards those therapists that have smaller group practices that are also insurance based. And that's the type of practice that I have. And so I've got that community. And then there's just a general community there for people to interact as well. And all of these are housed on the Circle app or the Circle platform. And if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you've heard me mention that. But if you'll just go over to practiceoftherapy.com/community, you can sign up for the general practice of therapy community there to get involved in that. no cost in that membership. And then if you're interested in doing something a little deeper with coaching from me and also being able to interact with others around specific topics, be sure to check out the other things that I have. So anyway, just wanted to put that out there to you. So again, before we get to my conversation with Megan, I'd love for you to hear from one of our other podcasters in the Sightcraft Network and also from our sponsor of the podcast, TherapyNotes.
Hey there, I'm Chris McDonald, and if you don't know me yet, I'm host of the Holistic Counseling Podcast, which is for therapists who want to deepen their knowledge of holistic modalities and build their practice with confidence. The Holistic Counseling Podcast is proudly part of the Sightcraft Podcast Network, a network of podcasts focused on helping people live more meaningful and productive lives. Join me each week as we explore the best practices for integrating holistic approaches into therapy and delve into the many benefits. Whether you're looking for new techniques or seeking to deepen your own personal journey towards wellness, this podcast is the perfect companion for your holistic path. If you haven't listened yet, you can find it over at holisticcounselingpodcast.com. and discover other resources, including products, books, and other trainings to help support you in your holistic journey.
One of the keys to a successful private practice is having the right systems and processes in place to make things run as smoothly as possible. With a system like TherapyNotes, you'll have more time to spend with what matters most, your clients. TherapyNotes is a complete practice management system with everything you need to manage patient records, schedule appointments, meet with patients remotely, create rich documentation, and bill insurance right at your fingertips. Their streamlined software is accessible wherever and whenever you need it. Your clinical records will be secure with less paperwork, which means you can give a much better quality of care. It's the EHR that Gordon uses in his practice. Be sure to check them out today by going to practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes and be sure to use the promo code GORDON to get 2 months free.
Well, hello, folks, and welcome again to the podcast. And I'm looking forward to you getting to meet Maegan Megginson. Hi, Megan. Glad to have you.
Hi, Gordon. So delighted to be here.
Yes. So we were chatting a little bit ahead of time. We both have these Southern roots, and so neither one of us detects an accent in the other. So that's good.
That's great.
That's a good thing. Yeah. So, well, Megan, as I start with everyone, why don't you tell folks a little more about yourself and how you've landed where you've landed?
Well, sure, Gordon. I'm so glad to be here. Again, my name's Maegan Megginson. I'm a business coach and a licensed therapist. And my journey started back in 2011 when I first became a therapist. And I've kind of tried all of the things. I've worn all of the different hats that a therapist can wear. I started postgraduate school as an employee in a group practice. I then went on to start my own private practice in Houston, Texas. And then my husband decided to retire from his oil and gas engineering career. We packed up our 3 Beagles. We moved across the country to Portland, Oregon, and I opened private practice version 2.0. And that was when my ambitious itch really started bothering me. And I knew I wanted to do something more than private practice. But at the time, I thought the only thing available to me was group practice. Mm-hmm. So I did it. I started a group practice. I actually still own the group practice here in Portland, Oregon. But a few years into the group practice, I was feeling really burnt out. I was feeling pretty creatively unfulfilled. And I just felt like there had to be another option for me and for therapists in general. And that's when I began exploring personal branding as a path for therapists who are ambitious that is different from group practice. And I have just really discovered my passion in personal branding. And now my full-time gig is business coaching and supporting other therapists who are wanting to move beyond private practice themselves.
Oh, so awesome. Yeah. And I think what's interesting, I think for a lot of us that have been in the field for a while, we tend to gravitate towards that. And I think that's, one thing that I hear or pay attention to is that our our skills as therapists and what we know and how we've been trained translates in a lot of ways across a lot of
That's
different
right.
things. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I often say therapists are some of the smartest, most creative, most talented people on the planet. And it's a damn shame that so many of them are stuck behind the door of their private practice office. That if
Right.
more therapists were in the spotlight talking about what they know and what they believe in, I think the world would be a much better place.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. I totally agree. So, well, so for folks that might be curious, when you speak of personal branding, what is that?
Great question. Okay, so if we boil it down to its essentials, Gordon, a personal brand is a business that's based on you. So it's a business that's based on your personality, your values as a person, and most importantly, your subject matter expertise or your specialty area. So you get to weave in your personality, your values, and what you know as a professional by creating a business and a message that calls the right people in to you. So, for example, if you are someone who specializes in anxiety and you have something really specific to say about helping millennial professional women overcome anxiety in the workplace, you can create a personal brand where you show up as you with your stories and your values, speaking specifically to those millennial women who you know are struggling with anxiety. That's just one example of a personal brand.
Right.
Another example that we're all familiar with would be Brene Brown. She's probably, the most famous person in the therapy space who has really done tremendous things with a personal brand.
Yes, yes. And I think that one of the things that at least I hear from folks, and maybe you can help them with this, is that they're maybe a little bit shy or a little bit wary, or I don't know what the right word is, of putting themselves out there in that way.
That's right.
Of really putting their name in the forefront and that sort of thing, and all the negative messages around that. You want to say something about that?
Oh, do I? I want to say many things about that, Gordon. I'll keep it brief. I think that for many therapists, stepping into the spotlight is challenging for two reasons. The first reason is graduate school, right? Most therapists are really created in graduate school programs that explicitly and implicitly teach us that we need to be blank slate therapists, right? That it is not appropriate to be ourselves in the therapy room, that it's, we got into this work for the client, not for ourselves. So don't be selfish. I mean, that's something my clients tell me they heard explicitly all the time. So we are conditioned in the therapy space to believe that we need to stay small and we need to stay quiet. And the second reason I think this is challenging, Gordon, is because many therapists grew up in families that taught them the exact same thing. Right? Many therapists are people-pleasing perfectionists who never quite fit into their family of origins, who received the messages from their family that they were odd or different or too shiny or too smart or too special. And could they just tone it down? Could they just be quiet? So many therapists are sitting in their private practice offices right now with a lifetime of conditioning that says, don't take up space on the stage. So of course, it feels really scary to think about putting their name out there and putting themselves out there. And there's a lot of work we have to do to get from private practice therapist to bold personal brand. But it's a journey that offers a ton of value, both for personal healing and professional opportunities.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I think is really a struggle for a lot of us. Well, a lot of folks is just getting through the mindset around what we were trained to do. As far as being those, and I've been doing this long enough where I've changed my mind about a lot of those things. Not to go too far on a rabbit trail here, but one of the things that I think gives us credibility and also builds rapport with clients is a bit of self-disclosure about our own struggles with things, and then being able to, give that empathy of say, I know kind of what this feels like because I've been there too,
Right.
kind of thing. And so,
I
yeah,
so
I think,
agree. I
yeah.
mean, I love that you've had just in your own practice that realization, and I agree. I mean, I first started thinking about this when I was having some transformational moments as the client with my therapist, and as my
Hmm.
therapist was showing me a bit more of her personality and sharing some of her life stories, and it was helping me go deeper into my own work. It pinged a little light bulb inside my mind of like, oh,
Hmm.
wait a minute, I was taught not to do that, but why was I taught that? Who made that rule? Because what's
Hmm.
happening for me in this moment is incredibly transformational.
Yeah.
And I think I've just taken that moment and and really have run with it. And now I am firmly on the other side of that spectrum where I believe, like I said, all therapists should be doing more self-disclosure, not necessarily in the therapy room all the time, but the way we self disclose in our branding by showing people our personality, by using our voice, by saying what's
Hmm.
true for us, what we really believe, those are really powerful ways to begin the kind of coming out process as
Yeah.
therapists who are also real three-dimensional human beings.
Right. Right. And as I think about it, you mentioned Brene Brown, and one of the things that that stands out for me about her is that she does a lot of self-disclosure, and talking
Definitely.
about which makes her approachable, and I think that's
Mhm.
why she has done as well as she has, just in this whole world. I don't think of her as a big self-promoting kind of person.
Mhm. Mhm.
She's done a brilliant job of creating, kind of establishing herself as an expert
Right.
and being able to connect with people in a certain way.
And it is about that balance, isn't it? It's the balance
Hmm.
between, I talk a lot in Next Level Therapist about courageous authenticity, right? That we want in our brands to be courageously honest and authentic about who we are, but we have to balance that with our subject matter expertise. So,
Hmm.
what is it that we're talking about? What is it that we're helping our clients with? If it's a therapy client, or if you've moved beyond private practice into coaching or consulting, what are you helping those clients with? And I think you're right. Brene does such a beautiful job of striking that balance between telling us who she is and sharing her honest stories with us as her audience, while also coming back to what is she teaching? What is her
Hmm.
message? What is she helping people overcome or transform in their own lives? That balance is what makes it a business and not
Hmm.
just, a blog or an Instagram account.
Right. Right. So as people are starting to think about this, what is the starting point in just thinking about creating a personal brand?
I think the starting point, and we're gonna, be our best therapist selves here and take one tiny little step at a time. And it is important when we're talking about this, Gordon, to be really connected to your own window of tolerance as a therapist as well. Because as we've both said, this process, it's a big change for many therapists. It is a 180 from how they are used to showing up in their lives and in their businesses. So it's important that you don't just dive off the deep end, but that you take it in small chunks. And for me, the first little chunk is by starting to explore what parts of my personality can I weave into my existing private practice?
Mhm.
What parts, and we get to choose, right? One of my favorite quotes a mentor said to me long ago was, you show your audience the real you, but that doesn't mean you show them all of you. So we have choice here in what parts of our lives and our stories we're weaving into our businesses. So this first piece of exploration is about your personality. What parts of your personality do you want to show to your clients? What parts of your personality do you want to weave into your website? Let's
Mhm.
start there. And when you get more comfortable expressing your personality, you can take, additional steps towards the profitable personal brand path.
Mhm. Right, right. Yeah, and I think as people hear from me, I think the other thing you've got to think about is how all of this fits with your life in general.
Mhm.
Particularly think about lifestyle. Another term that I've heard here recently that I love, and it's uh, lifestyle congruence. in that all of that fits for you in doing all of those things.
That's beautiful. I have not heard that term before,
Mm-hmm.
but I love it. Lifestyle congruence, business congruence. Like, how are we creating? I often think about what's the through line for me? What's the through line between my personal life and my business? Because I'm a big believer that I'm a business owner to serve me first, my clients second, which is a big reframe for many therapists who think that, they have to serve their clients to the detriment of their own needs. So if I'm thinking about lifestyle congruence and business congruence, a question you can ask yourself is, what is the through line for me? Why am I doing this? Why am I in business? What parts of my life do I want this to support? And that can be a helpful question to kind of open up the gates to thinking about, how can I bring more of myself and my own personal needs into what I'm doing as a therapist?
Right. Yeah. It's, I think that's the only way that we can really do it with preserving our own kind of mental health.
Right. Exactly. And something I often say is that I want all therapists to be deeply rested and wildly successful. And I think we often are taught that it's one or the other. Right. That you can be wildly successful, but if you choose that path, you're going to be sleazy, you're going to be exploitative, you're going to take advantage of people, and it's eventually going to land you in burnout. And if you want to be deeply rested, well, you can do that, but you're not going to be that successful. And I think this conversation kind of pulls people into a new paradigm where we say, no, actually, I think I'm going to be both. I think I'm going to find a way to be really rested and really successful and self-expressed and a healer and transforming people's lives. And that's what we're all working towards, I think, in this space, is how do we take care of ourselves and our clients and do it in a way that lifts everybody up?
Right. Yeah, I love that. Yeah. So tell folks a little bit about kind of how you work with them and the things that you do in helping people with all of this.
Thank you for the opportunity to share. I would love to. I work with clients through my signature coaching program, Next Level Therapist, which is a 6-month coaching community for therapists who have established private practices and are at the point where they're feeling burned out, they're feeling bored, they're feeling ready for the next thing. They know the next thing isn't group practice, but they're not sure how to create anything else. So in Next Level Therapist, I walk you from A to Z. How do you create a profitable personal brand? And it's a really beautiful community where we are trying to strike this balance between being and doing. We're trying to become deeply rested and wildly successful. And we're trying to change the world by expanding our impact, sharing more of what we know as therapists with more people on a bigger stage.
Yeah.
So that's Next Level Therapist. And it's a really, really special place.
Right. Yeah. I think, and it's an issue that comes up for all of us at some point. When a person first goes into private practice, they're really focused on getting a client base and getting those referrals and all of those sort of things. But eventually you reach kind of a plateau or a glass ceiling or whatever you want to call it. And so you really have to, at that point, you do have to switch from the one-to-one way of doing things to the one-to-many. And the good news is there's a lot of different ways to do that.
That's right. And it's one of the things I love about personal branding as well, is when you move into personal branding and you take a step beyond private practice by creating a second business, the options for what you can do and how you can work with people are endless. And that creativity really excites me. If you want to do a group program, you can. If you want to do an online course or a retreat or one-on-one coaching in a different way than you were doing therapy, those are all options that are available to you.
Yeah.
And I love how expansive the work becomes when we find an ethical way to move beyond the psychotherapy services that we're used to providing.
Right. So in your work in helping people with this, what sort of, you just mentioned some ways in which people can kind of begin to spread their wings, so to speak, by doing retreats, doing groups, doing group coaching or doing coaching and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
What topics are you seeing that people are moving into when they do this? So like if
Sure.
so for if somebody wanted to do a retreat, what would the retreat be about? Does that question make sense of what I'm asking?
Yes, it makes
Uh-huh.
great sense. And I
Uh-huh.
think this comes back to what we were talking about earlier of knowing your subject matter expertise or your specialty area. And what I find with clients in Next Level Therapist is people make a decision. They choose to either stay connected to the work they've been doing as a therapist, but they want to do it in a different way, or they want to pivot. They want to pivot subject matters entirely. So let's start with pivoting entirely. I'm thinking about a client of mine, Ariana Smith, who is a therapist in one part of her life. And in the other part of her life, she is a copywriting coach for other therapists. So she has created a separate business from private practice where she is teaching therapists how to write courageous copy. So that's an example of a therapist who said, I want to do something totally different from therapy. Another example is my client, Emmy Tafalski. And Emmy is a therapist in private practice who has specialized in grief and relationships. And she decided, I want to do something beyond private practice. So she created a coaching business where she's designed a group program called the Soul Weaver Experience, where she is helping women who have experienced untethering loss weave their souls back together. And she's using some of the things that she did as a therapist, but not in a psychotherapeutic way. She's really approaching this from a different lens. As a coach, she's teaching curriculum, leading experiences that help clients create transformation really on their own. So those are kind of two examples. You have to ask yourself, do I want to pull from my therapy practice to create a coaching business or a consulting business doing something similar? Or do I want to pivot entirely and do something totally unrelated to what I did as a therapist? Once you make that decision, you can just start to play and experiment with different ideas to figure out where's the magic for you? Where is the alignment for you around who you are and what you want to offer to the world?
Right. As you were saying that, I'm reminded of one of my favorite quotes by a guy. Some people, I know a lot of people have heard of him. His name was Joseph Campbell, and he was a professor of comparative religions at Sarah Lawrence College years ago. He was, I can't remember when he died, but anyway, not to get too far off on him, but one of his quotes was, follow your bliss. And so figuring out what it is that is passionate for you in your life. And when you do that, I'm paraphrasing the quote, doors will open where you didn't even know there were doors. And so I think that's something, as you were saying, of finding what it is that you would love to do beyond the therapy room, but beyond kind of this traditional way of thinking of the services we provide, and absolutely follow that and pursue that.
And remembering too that it's an iterative process. So you're not going to know the big thing that you are going to do the first time you move away from the therapy room. And I think that kind of perfectionism keeps a lot of people stuck in a paralysis, right? Where they feel like, oh, well, I can't take the next step until I know exactly what I'm meant to do and exactly what I'm meant to say. And on my journey, at least, I've discovered that it's through the doing and through the talking and the serving that I get closer and closer to the thing that really feels 100% correct. So if you have even a little inkling of what you might want to do right now, follow the inkling and then let it take you down that rabbit trail. And you're going to pivot and you're going to change directions. And that's all a beautiful part of the creative process. Eventually, you'll land where you're supposed to be.
Right. Oh, I love this stuff. Yeah, this is great. So, Megan, I got to be respectful of your time, and
thanks.
Yeah, and so I'm so glad you joined me for this episode. Tell folks how they can get in touch with you and find all your stuff.
Oh, well, I would love to. I have a couple of gifts for listeners if you are feeling a sort of magnetic pull to this conversation. If you're feeling curious about weaving more of your personality into your practice, which we said earlier is the first step of this process, I would love to offer you my Personality Power Pack, which is a lesson I have pulled straight from Next Level Therapist. It's a 5-step guide to help you discover your authentic personality and become unapologetically self-expressed in your business. So you can download that at personalitypowerpack.com. I also host a free writing group every Thursday morning called Express Yourself. And this is a beautiful community. We come together, I share a prompt, we write for 30 minutes, we practice expressing ourselves in real time, and then we come together at the end for 20 minutes of reflection and connection as community. So if you're looking for a space to get your hands dirty and to really try doing this work in a supportive community, you can join me every Thursday. You can register at expressyourselfstudio.com.
Awesome. And we'll have links here in the show notes and the show summary so people can get to that easily. So, well, Megan, thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Yes, this was such a wonderful conversation. I'm so grateful to you and for the work that you're doing on this podcast. Thank you so much for having me.
Again, a big thanks to Megan for joining me on the podcast. I really enjoy, as you all hear me say all the time, I really enjoy my conversations with people, and Megan was just a delight to talk to. And be sure and check out her things at Next Level Therapist, and you'll see links here in the show notes and the show summaries so that you can get to her stuff easily. And so be sure and check it out. And I hope to have Megan back on here soon to the podcast. And as I mentioned at the beginning, be sure and check out the resources and communities that we've got going at the website, practiceoftherapy.com. And I'd love to see you there. Love to have you be involved and just make those connections. I love being able to do this work as far as the podcast, but more than anything, I just love learning to hear people's stories and how they're growing their practices and the things that they're doing to find their way throughout this whole mental health, private practice, entrepreneurial, allied health space. There's a lot of different touch points there. But anyway, thanks for joining us in this episode. Be sure and check out our sponsor of the podcast, TherapyNotes, and you can find out more about them by going to TherapyNotes.com or just simply go to practiceoftherapy.com/TherapyNotes. And as was mentioned, be sure and use the promo code Gordon, GORDON. You can try them out for 2 months for free. And I'm always impressed with the improvements and the things that they're doing to the platform. Their support is second to none, and they've really just been really kind of an extension of my team and my practice with that platform as maybe as kind of weird as that sounds, a platform being a partner, but it really is. It really just makes the running of our practice so much easier, and being able to schedule people and keep track of the documentation and billing and all of that sort of thing. So love that platform. So check them out, practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes. And also be sure and check out all the other great podcasts that are in the Sightcraft Network. And if you'll just go to sightcraftnetwork.com, I've had 3 new members join us here recently. Chris McDonald, who has been on this podcast with the Holistic Counseling podcast. Also Steve Bisson with the Finding Your Way Through Therapy podcast, and also Julie Harris with Therapy for Your Money podcast. And also, just a quick plug, Julie's got a book coming out, and I'd love for you to check it out, Profit First for Therapists. And Julie, I'm really, really proud of her putting this book out, and it is great. She sent me a copy already, and I've been getting into it. So looking forward to you finding out more about that, and you'll be hearing more about her book as we move move through the year. So take care, folks. Again, be sure to follow us or subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it. And we'll talk to you again next week. You've been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, part of the Psychcraft network of podcasts. You can find out more about the other great podcasts in the network by visiting psychcraftnetwork.com. And if you haven't done so already, please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com and get your free private practice startup guide, along with a lot of other great resources and webinars and free things just by visiting. Also, be sure to follow us wherever you might be listening to your podcasts. This podcast is intended to be educational in purpose and is not intended to give legal, accounting, or counseling advice. If you need a professional, find the right person for that.